Kumlen Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Samach Daled. We are up to the Mishnah. So we're talking about if you sell a house, what comes with it and what is not included unless you specify. So we're continuing. And we already discussed this yesterday in the Gemara, and now we're learning the Mishnah that was discussed. Loy es haboy. When you sell a house, the boy, the pit, which is outside the house, which is there to contain water, the loy es hadus, nor the dus. Now, what is the difference between a boy and a dus? The Gemara will explain in a minute. But it's again also like a cistern that it captures your water. So then they are not included in the sale. In fact, after what Avdimi said, and it seems the Gemara concludes that we follow Avdimi. So this is the pshat in the Mishnah. A house does not include the airites, does not include the ground underneath the house. So if you add the words oimka v'reima, I'm telling you the house and also its depth and its height. If you sell that, all it includes is the height and what's underneath. Does not include the boir and the dus, because they're not really part of the house and they're not really does not have the same use as the house. Is there to serve the house. So afa pisha kosla oimka v'reima, but you have to add then mitahoim. If you add those words to Haimara, so you're much more descriptive, then we say it's more inclusive and you're including the boy with the dus. Now, what about, okay, so you sold, let's say you did sell, what do you call it? So the Meichid retains the ownership of the boy, but he sold everything else, the courtyard and the house. How does he get to the boy? He needs to walk through the other person's chatzah to get to the boy. Is the tzarich likach loyderech di Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara is going to conclude that the logic of Akiva is when a person sells, he's very generous. So he sold him an entire courtyard, including the area that he is to walk through to get to the bar. And now, if he wants to be able to go to his bar, he needs to buy that right back. Because Meiche ba'ayin yafa Meiche, he sells with a generous eye. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. The Chachamim, the Chacham say no way in the world will a Meicher sell something knowing that he retains the bird and he's going to fly in the air to get to the bird. Obviously, he retains also the path to get to the bird. Because a Meicher ba'ayin ra Meicher, you're stingy. You sell as little as you have to. But a Meid Rabbi Akiva is made in the following case. Bisman sha'amalef, he clearly is delineated. Chutz me'elu, I'm selling you the house, but I'm not including the bird. Why did he have to say I'm not including the bird? Anyway, it wasn't part of the sale. Why did he specify I'm not including the bird? As if to say I'm not including the bird and the use of the bird, as if he's adding something. He's adding the way to the bird, the path to the bird. I'm keeping for myself as well. So even though generally moicha ba'ayin yafa moicha, but in this case it's as if you stipulated, but I'm retaining the path. Then in that case you don't have to buy the way to go there. You already included. You stipulated that in the shtar. Kiva says, sorry, what happens if mochra la'achar? What happens? You sold the buyer. You kept the house, but you sold the buyer. This is now the safe of the Mishnah. So the other way around. You sold the buyer. According to Rabbi Akiva, you're very generous. When you sold the buyer, how is he meant to get to the buyer? Obviously, you included the path. Because kol ha-moicher ba'ayin yafa moicher. So look at that. We're up to the Mishnah here, and this is the Mishnah that we discussed yesterday, where whether a person is generous when they make a sale. So you sold the house and the yard, but the bar is not included. So what happens then? Do you have to buy your pathway again because you sold everything because you're generous? That's Rabbi Akiva, or that you're not very generous and definitely you retain the path. But Rabbi Akiva is moided. This is the safer now. If you sold the bar itself to somebody else, since what do you call it? I'm sorry, the safer to have another argument. Instead of selling the house, you sold the boat. According to Rabbi Akiva, you're generous, or it automatically includes the pathway to get to the boat. But Rabbi Chama say, you're stingy. If all you said in the star, you're selling a boat, that's all you sold. If he wants to get, he can parachute himself in. If he wants to actually walk through my yard to get to the boat, he has to buy that right separately. Where Rabbi Akiva's made is where you you stipulated, I'm selling to the house, but I'm not selling you the boy, which is totally superfluous. You don't need to say that. Obviously, what he's saying is, I'm not selling you the boy and what I need to get to that boy, the path. Says the Gemara, first of all, Gemara wants to know what's the difference in a boyer and a dus. Aren't they the same thing? They're both pits that contain water. Yosh Rabbeinu Kakashale, Hainu boy, Hainu, aren't they the same thing? Amalei Rabbeinu Rabbeinu Toshba coming at time you learned Echad boyer dus bekarka. They're both on the ground. Elosha boyer bechafida vadus bebinyan. Boyer is basically you have sand in your perimeter, and a dus is where you put concrete. The sand is a bit soft, and you're scared that the sand will cave in, so you put concrete around it. And you hold the water. That's the difference of boyer and a dus. That's how the Rashbam and Moses training learned. Others learn actually that the dus bebinyan means that the dus is above the ground, and the boyer is below the ground. But the idea is the same. Yossi Rabashi Kakash Rabashi has the same similar discussion. Hainu boyer hainu dus. Omle Markish Rabashi Rabashi Toshba coming here. Hainu Echad boyer dus bekarkel Shabbat Chliu dus bebinyan. Very similar, but they're different. So we need each one is a chiddush. Because if you would have told us that a dus is not included, I would say, well, a dus is a choshev bebinyan. You have a building there, so therefore it's separate. But a boyer is just a hole in the ground. Maybe it forms part of the choshev and everything else and sold with it. But if you only told us boyer is not part of boy is not part of it. I'll say the boy is not part of it is because it's not really like a house, it's a totally different thing. But a dus, which is a building, a structure, it's like a house. So maybe it's included in the house. Therefore, you have to tell me this both. Now the Gemara is trying to explore what is the Svara Rabbi Akiva, because we seem to have a very similar machlekes on a number of occasions about whether the moichet has to buy anything back to get to what he retains or not. And if the principle is the same, why do you have to repeat it over and over again? And who said the principle is about moichet and yafa moichet? Because there's a general question when a person sells someone a tree. Does he also sell him the right that if the tree dies, he can replant another tree there? No, it's called a moichet ba'ayin yafa moichet. Or do we say no? Moichet ba'ayin yura moichet. I sold you the tree dies, it withers away. Too bad. That's it. I never talked to you about the rights to replant it. I gave you the rights to the earth and to the ground itself. Now, in that case over there, there's no loss to the moichet at all. One way or another, because the tree is already existing. But still, the question is, when you sell something, are you generally generous or generally you're not generous? That's the general question. You're very frugal. In our case over here, the moichet has a loss if he doesn't, for example, retain the path, he has to buy it. There's a loss involved. So it's a little bit different than there, but we're thinking right now the principle is the same. But the Gemara will come up with other theories until the Gemara finally concludes that you're right. Says the Gemara, the argument is very simple. Rabbi Akiva holds that you're very generous, and that you're not generous at all, and therefore when you sold the guy the property and everything else, and you retain the boy, you also retain the pathway to the boy, because you're not giving everything away. And what we say in other cases, like the case I just told you, that if somebody sold a tree and he kept for himself the land in front of him, whether and the tree dies, whether the person has the right to replant it again, we said over there that's the machlekes of Kiva Chachamim. The same principle of moichet ba'ayin yafa, moichet ba'ayin, because it's a little bit different. There's no loss there to the moichet. Therefore, we have to spell out again that even so, it's a general attitude. When a person sells something, are you very generous in your sale or you're very frugal? Says and where do we say that? Whenever the Gemara says that this is the argument of Kiva Chachamim, where do we find where's the basis of that argument? Right in this Mishnah here, regarding when you sell a boy, what about the path? Says the Gemara, who told you that that's Chatna Mishnah? Maybe our Mishnah is totally unrelated to this principle of whether you're generous or not. So what's the machlekes in our Mishnah? Dilma, Rabbi Akiva holds very simple. Rabbi Akiva holds. Let's think. There's two things that are concerning here. One is from the moichet's perspective. How is he meant to get to the boy? He's worried. How am I going to get to the boy? So maybe he retains ownership of the pathway. That's his hakpada. Let's look at the Lekech perspective. His hakpada is, I want people to walk through I bought it. It's mine. This guy's going to walk through my house, for example, to get to the boy. What I wanted to walk through my property to get to the boat. So my hakpad is I don't want people. Well, I bought a house and the house was privacy. I don't want to walk through my house to get to the boat. So therefore, maybe that's the argument. Which hakpada is more concerning? Nothing to do with generally. In the case of the tree and the karka, nobody gets hurt. So therefore, that's a machlekes moichet ba'ayin yafa, nothing to do with our Mishnah. So our Mishnah is not the basis for it, because maybe the Akiva holds ain't adam reitzes. I'm splurging money here. I'm paying money for property, and I don't want to give it a chedim. Do I want other people to walk through my property? It's mine. It's mine and mine alone. And that's the main hakpada. That's the biggest concern. And therefore, we'll say, you know what? The guy sold everything. If he wants to get to the buyer, he has to discuss and negotiate with the owner of the house, the new owner of the house. And the Rabban Sabri, no. Our greater concern is the other person. He retains the buyer and he can't get to it. What's the point? I took money from the guy, sold him something, and then I put myself in a very invidious position. How am I going to get to my buyer, which I haven't sold, and I locked myself out of it? It's not smart, not prudent. So, which is the main concern? Okay, you're right. No eye from that. I'll tell you where I bring an eye from. The Sefer. What was the next case in this very mission we just learned? There's the other way around. I retain ownership of the house and everything else, but I sold the other person, I sold him a bird. And sold a bird. And the same machlekes. Rabbi Kiva Omer Einu Tzarech Likod. If you sold the bird and you sold also the guy the rights to walk through your house to get to the bird, and the reason is because you're generous. And here it's not that the svara we said that a person when he buys something and splurges money doesn't want other people walking through doesn't make sense here, because here's the moicher who he's not spending a cent. He's selling. So, but he knows this is what's going to happen. So that's what doesn't make sense here. And the Chachamim say that tzaddik, no, that you have to. And we said before the concern of the Chachamim is, if I'm retaining ownership of the bird, how am I meant to get there? Therefore, for sure, I want the path. Over here is the other way around. I sold him the bird. So as far as the Meicha is concerned, there's no concern there how to get to the bird. I don't need to get to the bird. I'm my bird. So the concern is the way you explain the beginning mission. The only way to explain this safer is that they're arguing about how do you sell something, generously or tight or very frugal. Says Imano, and give you another. Okay, I'll step back. I'll tell you what the machlekes is. Not so much which hakpod is more concerning. The machlekes is whose case are we going to advocate for? Are we going to advocate for on behalf of the lekech whenever there's a sale? Who are we more concerned about that we have to make sure that they protect their rights? The vendor or the buyer? Who are we more concerned about? And that's the machlekes. It doesn't matter that the hakpod changes in each case. So Abba Kiva says we always look at the buyer. The buyer has to have the best deal possible. You sold him the house and you kept the bird. He has to have the best deal. No, the pathway belongs to the buyer. Or if you sold the buyer the bird, how's he going to get there? He has to walk through the property. Give it to the buyer. Why? Because we always advocate for the buyer. And the Chacham said, no, we advocate for the seller. Nothing to do with where there is hakpada. What about the case of the tree and the land? There's no hakpadas there. I sold you a tree. There's nothing hakpadas right now. So therefore, because if a tree lasts for 1,000 years, that's what it is. So there's no hakpada, real hakpadas there. And maybe so therefore the machlekes in our Mishnah has nothing to do with the machlekes over there, whether he has the right to replant the tree or not. So you can't relate the two. So when we say that it's not from our Mishnah. We have to look at the eyes of the lekech, the buyer, and the Rabban hold go to the eyes of the meicher. Let's go to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah says when you sell a house, you sell the chattel, only permanent chattel, only the chattel that's permanently part of the house. But anything which is mobile, portable, is not included. Curtains are not included. Things which are not fixed in the house are not included. So, and the Mishnah says as follows. The next Mishnah. It says there, sorry, this actually Mishnah, we skipped a few blocks ahead. We'll come back to this Mishnah later. It says that when you sell, you don't include the bird. So they talked about if you sell a field. Now we're talking about selling a field. Now in our Mishnah, we're talking about selling a house. In the next couple of Mishnahs, we talk about selling a house. Later on, we talk about if you sell a field, what's included in the field and not included in the field. So we talk about stones which are necessary for the field, obviously are included. Stones which are not necessary for the field are or are not. So it says there, when you sell a field, loyas habor, the boy is not part of the sale. Loyas hagas, and not the wine press. Loyas hashayvich, and not the chicken coop, the dovecot. Bein charevin, bein yeshuvin, whether they're being used or whether yeshuvin are settled, whether they're dry, they're not being used at all. It doesn't matter. They're not included. Even they're not being used, you can argue it's part of the field. No. It has another purpose, so it's not automatically included in the sale. You have to spell it out. But now, so what happens? The owner retains ownership of this gas, of this wine press, let's say, of the bird, and it says there again, he has to buy a road. Now, it's exactly the same thing in the case of a house. So why does the Mishnah have to repeat it again? Other than to tell you that you should know. Don't make the mistake and think they're arguing about whether we advocate for the buyer or for the seller. It must be another machlekes altogether. That is, are you a generous seller or are you a frugal seller? Why have to repeat this? Same principle. Elalav, isn't it? How kamash? The Mishnah I tell you, don't make a mistake and think that the argument of Akiva Chacham is whether the tech or the moich is the main thing. No, they're arguing moich that Akiva holds moich ba'in yofa, moich ba'in moich. That's how we know, because it's of being extra. We don't need it. It's coming to tell you that the machlekes of Akiva Chacham is about the generosity of the moich or otherwise. Does anyone know? I can learn that the machlekes there is exactly the same machlekes here as to we advocate on behalf of the buyer, give him the best position, or we advocate on behalf of the moicha. Since there are hakpadas involved, we give him the best position. So why do you have to repeat it? Because our mission is talking about a house and they're talking about a sada, and we would have thought they're different. The dilma ashmin and bias, the kamashal on sada. Maybe we need to tell you the same principle about whether we advocate for the buyer or the seller, but once in the case of a house and one in the case of a field. We need both, for example. The Ashmin bias a house, I would say, over there in the house, the lokech really has a big problem. You're going to walk through my house to get to the it's a really big problem. What's a house? A house is for privacy, and having you coming all the hours of the day, you're invading my privacy. Avos Sada, there's no privacy in the field. What does it bother you if the Meicha walks through the field to get his bird? So maybe we would have thought that up there, everybody agrees that you would give automatically the right to the vendor to get to his bird, to get to his gas. There's no privacy there. Maybe there's no argument at all. So we need to say no. And even there, Rabbi Kiva argues and says that no, the Meicha has to buy the right to go there. You should tell us only the case of the field. The Iash Mina Sara field, I would say the Koshle Dafsha. Walking on the field, you're walking on the ground. I want to plant. When you're walking on it, you're actually ruining my soil. But the footsteps might be seized there. I don't want people walking not because of privacy, but because you're going to cause me an economic damage. So therefore, maybe Dafka over there, Rabbi Kiva says, Moicha, you want to be able to walk to your buyer, buy the rights or negotiate with your buyer of the field. Our buyer is when he walks in the house and he walks on the ground, there's no economic loss there. And Rabbi Kiva is made that he kept the buyer automatically, he has the right to go there. So therefore, no raya from that. So okay, I'll go back to Elam Seif. Let's go back to our Mishnah. It says Mochron le'achar. Sorry, that Mishnah there. The Seif of that Mishnah there. Same idea as our Mishnah. You sold it to somebody else, right? You sold the boy to somebody else, and you kept the field. Rabbi Kiva says that person there does not have to buy a way through, because Moicha and you have to buy. But why you way through now? If the principle is exactly the same, because we look at do we help out the buyer or the seller? We already know that from the beginning. We know that from our Mishnah here. And if you can tell me, no, we want, what you just said, we need a bias and a sada. But once we've established already that a sada is no different than a bias, then why you have to repeat the safe again? Same thing. We already established the principle that a bias are the same thing. And that case is written there to teach you that you don't learn the wrong shot in the argument of Kiva Chamim. Nothing to do with the advocating for buyer or seller when there's problems. That's the crux. Now we go back to the case of the tree. You sold you sold the trees and you left behind. We had the beginning of Chesed Batim, and you left behind the karka. That the guy, the machleket of Kon Rabbi Kiva, the guy, if the tree dies, has a right to replant it. The Kon Chachamim doesn't. Eat what we learned. Rav Huna says, Halacha Kediva Chachamim. Rav Huna says the name of Rav, that the halacha is like the Chachamim, Ba'moicher, Ba'ayin Ra Moicher. And Rabbi Yimra Bar Abba, Omar Shmuel, and Rabbi Yimra Bar Abba says the name of Shmuel, Halacha Ki Rabbi Akiva. Halacha Rabbi Akiva. Now, so Rav Huna was a Talmud of Rav, and Rabbi Yimra Bar Abba was a Talmud of Shmuel. Rabbi Yimra Bar Abba said Rav Huna, but Zimus once happened. I myself, you tell me a Maisa Bakiva holds that the halacha like a Chamim. I remember I once told Bakiva, I told the Rab that the halacha is like Rabbi Kiva. Well, he didn't make any comments. That means he agreed with me. How can you say in the name of Rab that he passed like a Chamim when I said the halacha Rabbi Kiva and he agreed with me? Now the next piece of Gemara that Hashem have a big difficult time understanding, other than learning that it wasn't really a discussion between this is an imaginary discussion. It never happened. Because the Gemara is going to say over here, look at the Gemara says. The way we learn the literal Pshat Gemara. So tell me, Rav Huna says to me, Rabbi, what exactly, how did you learn this mission? I learned the other way around. Rabbi Kiva is the one who says Ba'ayin Ra, and the Chachamim say Ba'ayin Favor, and therefore so you said, Mishum Hachil Amlach Lamidi. That's why I didn't tell you anything, because Rabbi Akiva is our Chachamim. Now, so what was Rabbi Abba's question in the first place? So now the simple shot is Rabbi Abba didn't know the other version. His only version was what he learned. That's how he understood it, and therefore they didn't talk about Ayin Yo Ayin Rafa. They just said Halacha Rabbi Akiva Chachamim, and therefore he said, how can you say Halacha Chachamim? Because he thought that everyone lived the Mishnah like him. What I other want to say is the Gemara stepping in here and trying to understand what happens. It's an imaginary conversation. Yeah, let's say they all went consistent with their opinion. We had this before in the first page of Zion. That the Rabbi Shmuel are consistent with their view. Just finish the sugya. Two brothers separate divide an estate. They're like sales. We have machlekes. If you hold yesh bread, but it's like a kuchas hain or yoshin hain. It's like a sale. So therefore, now just to understand it, where Rashbam and the Mukhyeshiv and others learn. Interesting cases, there's a little bit between the Zion and base, but they learn very simple. Let's say each brother is a seller, but each brother is also a buyer. So let's say we split the house. You get the second house, and I get the first house. Let's say, in order to get from the first house to the second, you have to go through my house. So everyone whatever they end up with, as far as you're concerned, your relationship is as a buyer, and whatever the other brother ends up with, my relationship with that is I'm the seller. So I'm a buyer and I'm a seller. I sold him, but what I have is I bought. So if you hold that kol hamoicher b'ayin yafa moicher, so you sold him everything. So the din should be that you also give him the path through your house there. But I'm the buyer, and because I'm the buyer, he was generous to me. So therefore, the Ram Nachman was a Talmud of Shmuel, and Rabbi Huna is a Talmud of Rav. They have no road on each other, because each one is my house. I'm the buyer. And since I'm the buyer, you sold me everything. You want to get to your house? Fly. Well, they're not ladders on each other. We already had before Machlekes is showing you what it means. According to Rashbam and others, showing it means that the guy upstairs, he lives upstairs, and the guy downstairs has the house and the chutzah. So how do I get to my house? I need a ladder. But since the guy downstairs is the buyer, so the guy upstairs sold him everything, including the right. The rights of the ground. So the guy upstairs can't or just put a ladder there, because the guy downstairs is the buyer. So the guy upstairs wants to get upstairs. He wants to put a ladder to get upstairs. He needs to negotiate with his brother downstairs. According to Taisus, the guy upstairs also owns the chutzah, but the problem is he's putting his ladder against the house of downstairs, and he's hurting the wall, impacting the wall. He needs to negotiate that. Because each brother is also a buyer. And you can't have any tightness. I have a window there. I can put a wall right in front of you and block your window because I'm the buyer and you sold me very nicely. Everything, all rights. If I want to get my water, I want to get water to my property, and I have to go through your property. Even though when our father was there, he had it. I can't just automatically do it because you're the buyer and I sold you everything. So if I want the water to go through your property, get to mine, I got to negotiate with you. These are the fixed halachas. But Rav says yesh lehem. Rav says no, that they have the rights, because he holds like the Chachamim that a moiche b'ayin ra moiche. So he kept. So therefore, each buyer got less. You did not get when I sold you the house the house. I didn't sell you the rights. That you can stop me from going to my house there, because each buyer got, according to the Chachamim, the outer house is a buyer. And he therefore did not get the pathway that gets from the outside to the inner house, because when the inner house sold it to you, he sold you but to retain for himself the walkway to get to his house. Gemara says, "It's the same machlekes Rabbi Shmuel." Why have to repeat it again? I even said over there, over here, in this case of chaloinus, is even though the principle is the same as we said on the top of the page, but over there is different. The brother has another taina. Let's continue living here let's resume like our father. Our father had a pathway to go into the house through our house. So even though all that kind of stuff, but I want to we yashin to live exactly the way our parents lived. So I should be able to walk through your house to get to my house. So that's a taina. Even though moicher, let's say ba'ayin yafa moicher, that means according to Shmuel, that means that the inner house cannot walk through the outer house because he sold everything to the outer house. But in this case of Yerusha, maybe it's different because my father lived there. I should be able to continue. Teda, they step into the father's shoes. Now, case here, maybe maybe Rav agrees to Shmuel. That what? That Meicher Ba'ayin Yofa Meicher. And there's different that the brother said, Taka, normally I'm generous, but I want to live like my father lived. He walked into his house. Leave my over here, but because only here maybe there's Moed that the child can say, I want to live like my father. Both. Interesting. So who do you think the halach is like? Me or you? Our team, which is Nachman and Shmuel, or is it like you, Rav Huna and Rav? Interesting. Now he could have said Allah like me. I'll acknowledge Allah like you. Why? The makrivitu lebava the reish gelusa, because you are close to the reish gelusa. He was actually the son-in-law of Nachla the reish gelusa. The shchicha dayanis. The Shbam learns that you hang around the bezdin so you know what's going on, how they paskin. Others learn that Rav Nachman himself was a dayan. He says dayan no. He said Rav Shei says you can't argue with me. You know dayan. I'm a dayan. And he was done Yechidi, as Gemara says in Sanhedrin, we'll see. We'll learn. So bottom line is the halacha is that a moiche ba'ayin yafa moich. Okay, continue tomorrow.